Look, you all know how much I love Florida. I've dedicated my public life to serving the people of Florida. Most Floridians are kind, decent people who look out for our communities and truly love our democracy. But this is one national list that I am ashamed that Florida is leading. And it breaks my heart that so many individuals responsible for violent attack on our nation's democracy are Floridians. So today, I'm calling on Governor Ron DeSantis to use the power of his office and our state government to get a handle on this entire situation. I'm asking the governor to immediately issue an executive order to create a nonpartisan state commission to investigate the connection between violent extremism, the ties of Florida, and the insurrection of January the 6th. This is not about politics. This is about protecting our democracy. This is about protecting law-abiding Floridians. This is about protecting our communities from extremists. And with the stroke of the pen, Governor DeSantis, you can help. I'd like to turn the microphone over now to Rabbi Durham.
The book of Deuteronomy teaches us, justice, justice shall you pursue. Twice repeating the word justice, the text teaches us both the urgency of pursuing justice, do it now, and the manner of pursuing justice, do it justly. To Governor DeSantis, I have a message, justice, justice shall you pursue. On January 6th, when we watched an unprecedented insurrection unfold in our nation's capital, and as we just heard, 47 Floridians are facing charges more than in any other state. Those who fomented this rebellion grounded their actions in pure hatred of the other. We've seen this hate growing like a cancer for the past 4.5 years. Hatred expressed through violence, slurs, and arson, through defacing property, verbal abuse, and threats. Hate directed towards people whose skin is brown or black, whose identity is Jewish or Muslim, people who with pride know themselves truly as LGBTQ or plus. To allow such hatred to go unanswered, not investigated, for the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers, violent hate groups to continue to spew their bigotry and discrimination, is a travesty of justice. For the leaders of our state to turn a blind eye to the threats of justice and the well-being of our community is a failure of leadership. Our governor stands idly by while the blood of his brothers cries out from the earth demanding action. We echo the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I would add, a threat to democracy anywhere is a threat to democracy everywhere. With anti-Semitic incidents increasing, the Jewish community sees a direct correlation between the rise of hatred across America, fomented by those who still seek to undermine the very democracy that guarantees our safety. January 6th was a day of national crisis that thankfully ended with democracy restored. We still need action by our governor to assure us that violence by Floridians shall never be allowed to threaten our democracy. Establish a commission. We need our governor to not be afraid of the truth, knowing that deceit and falsehood will fail as our society reaffirms the commitment to honesty and truth. Establish a commission. We need our governor to stake a claim in favor of treating one another with the utmost of dignity, respect, and love. Because if he were to see every citizen of Florida as a reflection of what is most holy, he would surely want to lead the way to investigate and rid our state of those who attack the core value, love your neighbor as yourself. Let us affirm peace, truth, love of others, created in God's image. Know that incitement to evil and insurgency will never be tolerated in this democracy. I'd like to introduce now former Pinellas County Commissioner and candidate for mayor of the great city of St. Petersburg, Mr. Ken Rush.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi. Good morning. I want to thank Congressman Chris and all the leaders gathered here today. This issue before us is a simple matter of accountability and equal justice. We all witnessed the violence, chaos, and mayhem in our nation's capital on January 6th. The violence of the Capitol attack is self-evident. We saw it, we heard it, we experienced it in real time. Our response to this unprecedented and coordinated attack on our government and our elections process will define the concept of American justice to our nation and to the world. While the impact of the attack is devastating, including the death and injury of Capitol Police officers, an even larger threat is the relative silence or the outright from elected officials who ignore or excuse this violent criminal behavior driven by lies and hate. Their actions fuel a cycle of violence, undermines our democratic process, and represents an imminent threat to our national security. A nonpartisan investigation of any Florida link to the insurrection is critical. The rise of hate groups and the increase in hate crimes in the United States is an epidemic, as the rabbi said. It's a cancer. And our community right here in St. Pete is not exempt from that cancer. In my final year as a county commissioner last year, I witnessed the escalation of rhetoric and threats as the commission tried to handle the COVID-19 pandemic. And right here in St. Petersburg, a few blocks away at Straw Park, as my family and I marched in a rally against hate, we were confronted by angry protesters, some from out of town, from these same groups bent on disruption and confrontation. It's time to bring this chaos to an end. It's time for accountability and the equal application of justice. The future of our democracy depends on it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Ben Diamond, privileged to represent this district in Tallahassee in the Florida House of Representatives, and I want to thank Congressman Chris for inviting me to be here today, and I want to thank all of you for joining us. January 6th was one of the darkest days in our nation's history, and I think for many of us it will feel like a day that we will always remember where we were and what was happening. That unprecedented attack on our nation's capital, as so many of the previous speakers have mentioned, was an attack on our very democracy, on our values, on our Constitution, and our fundamental rights as Americans. The Attorney General of the United States has recognized that these hate groups and these violent extremists are one of the greatest threats to our continued rights and freedoms as Americans. And sadly, we've recently learned that there were many Floridians that were involved in the insurrection that are now facing criminal charges. And that is stunning. And for the safety of all Floridians, we need to understand why. As you all know, many of these groups espouse very dangerous white supremacist and anti-Semitic ideologies. And just a few weeks ago, we were all standing here together in front of this museum. The diversity of this city was in full effect as we came together to rally against anti-Semitism, against bigotry, against hate, after our museum was unfortunately scarred with anti-Semitic graffiti. Florida is much better than this, and our leaders must take action to show that we're better than this. This past legislative session in Tallahassee, I had a front row seat to the politics of fear and division, and I'm just sick of it. And I'd like to see some different leadership in terms of how we approach these problems. So I appreciate very much the call today by Congressman Chris for an all
to keeping hate out of our state and keeping our community safe. Thank you.
I want to thank all the speakers this morning. I appreciate your being here. It's an honor. The governor needs to take consecutive action today, but he also needs to make clear where he stands on critical issues surrounding the greatest threat to our democracy since the Civil War. To eliminate confusion that was deliberately sown, which led to the January 6th insurrection, the governor needs to answer the following questions. Do you acknowledge that Joe Biden is our duly elected president? Do you agree that violent assault on our nation's capital is the very definition of insurrection? And finally, Governor, do you support an independent, nonpartisan commission to investigate that insurrection. We need answers from our state's chief executive on these questions. We need Governor DeSantis to sign this executive order today to create an independent state commission to investigate hate groups that plague our state. Governor DeSantis, we need you to do the right thing for all Floridians and for our very democracy. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know.
Well, one of my questions is for the people, the Floridians that were there January 6th, what would you say directly to them?
Shame on them. It's terrible what they did. To participate in an insurrection against the very cathedral of freedom, our nation's capital, is unconstitutional.
Can you respond to the governor sidestepping the question about the election being rigged? He said something about some shady things happening. We're looking to get your reaction on that.
You say it again.
Yeah, the governor made some comments about the election. He kind of sidestepped the question about the election being rigged. He said some shady things were happening. What's your response to that?
Well, I think you ought to answer questions. Why would you sidestep a question like that? Either feels one way or the other.
Let me ask you more directly. Yesterday, the governor was asked, is the 2020 election rigged? He refused to answer. Is he fomenting this type of insurrection and violence by not answering that question?
His silence is hurting everything. You know, he ran to be governor. He needs to understand that's a leadership position in the state. Pretty big one, as a matter of fact. And if you can't answer questions like that, why are you trying to lead? He's not leading. He's leaving a voice. Leaving a voice. Let's see.
Congressman, the FBI is looking into this. They seem to be doing a pretty thorough job investigating. They've almost 500 arrests now. The Congress is also, going to look into this in the committees. Why a separate state investigation? What will that do?
Because sadly, Florida leads the nation in the number of arrests that led to this insurrection itself. As I said earlier, reported by the Sarasota Herald Tribune and USA Today, we're number one in America to participate in this insurrection. That is shameful. It needs to be investigated. We need to find out why that was possible in a place like Florida. It shouldn't be. And the governor needs to take leadership and sign this executive order today.
You were governor. Do you have any idea how you think a commission like this would be set up? Has this been done in the state before?
A commission like this can be set up in a nonpartisan fashion. You can have Republicans, Democrats, and Independents as members of this commission to look into why this happened, how this happened, and make sure it never happens.
One thing I'm hearing from conservatives after publishing this article, and you hear it from some conservatives in Congress as well, what about left-wing extremism? They point to Antifa and some of the protesters that were involved in the Black Lives Matter movement who got violent. Do you think that left-wing extremism is a problem as well that should be investigated?
Extremism of any kind should not be tolerated. That's obvious. But what we need to do is to look into the most extremist attack against our country at the nation's capital this past January the 6th. And I think the governor can lead on doing that if he has the